Sawubona, Honorable.
Sawubona.
Is it Sawubonani? Unjani?
Sanibonani is when it's many.
Okay.
And Sawubona is when you're greeting one person.
Wow, but you know, South Africa got over 11 official languages.
Yes.
Which one do you speak?
I speak almost all of them except one. So I speak 10 languages.
Wow. I love the one with the sound, you know.
Or the Xhosa.
The Xhosa.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Yeah, that's Xhosa. So we've got Xhosa, we've got Zulu. This is Zulu, we've got Sepedi, we've got Setswana, we've got Shanganu, we've got Chivenda.
Wow.
We've got and then Setswana, we've got Sindebele, and then we've got Siswati. So English, Afrikaans.
One thing that I love about Southern Africa is that all the languages that you speak in, if you go to Eswatini, you go to Lesotho, all of them speak similar languages. That's amazing. But the reason that we are here is because of Berlin Global Dialogue, and I love the fact that this time around Africans are included. You remember the Berlin Conference, 1844?
Yeah.
Welcome to Berlin. This is where Africa was partitioned. That's why you are South African and I'm a Ghanaian.
Yes.
Those days before 1844, we were like, oh, that's my African mother.
You know, that would have been different. And we were, separated, segregated on the basis even of colonizers. And we still, the legacy is still on, it's still there. We're trying to deal with that legacy as a continent, obviously because of that slavery and, I mean, with us apartheid, we continue to see majority of our population living in abject poverty and not being able to benefit even from the minerals that they are able to, which are beneath their soil. So it's those legacies that lives on. We might have seen our freedom as a continent, many of us, but because of those challenges, you see what we see today, it's not easy. Yeah.
I know it's really not easy, but one thing that I normally say whenever I meet African leaders like yourself, I'm like, it's been over 60 years since we had our independence. It's over 60 years since we had our freedom. But I mean, when you travel within Africa, it's a major challenge. You don't think it's about time Africans start traveling within Africa freely, like the way probably you landed in Amsterdam and then they checked you in Amsterdam and you got to Berlin without no one checking in here. You don't think we need something like that in Africa?
We do have in the SADC region, for example. Actually, the democracy came later. Other countries might have seen 60 years. We not yet 30 years as a country in South Africa. But when you look at freedom of movement within the SADC region, and what Africa has been able to do is to segregate within the regions. So you have more better movement within the region, but not fully in terms of the entirety of the continent. That's why part of the work that we're doing in the continent around Agenda 2063 and the AFCTC. So trading amongst African countries to improve, and that would enable movement of goods and people within the continent. And that's, I do believe that it's not going to be easy, but it will move. Remember, in terms of the conversations, even for example, you'd have some of the people would feel when conversations such as de-dollarization comes in, they see it as almost like an attack to the West, not seeing it as Africans as well trying to unite within themselves and finding common denominators. You can never have movement of people when your own currencies are not united. So it's the same thing. You come to the European countries, there is a euro, which makes it easier to trade within European countries, and it unifies them. So movement of goods and people would have to go with the currencies, and the ability to be able to trade means that within your currencies, you've got to be able to deal with it. When I go to Ghana, I find a different currency. You come to South Africa, you find a different currency. You go to Nigeria, you find a different currency. And it makes it difficult in terms of those movements, closing down and opening up of the borders. But the challenges as well. Sometimes we look at it in terms of security issues. You find that the insurgents of quite a number of things. You would have seen South Africa recently got grey listing. Grey listing as a result that you are starting to have a lot of people who are within the ISIS military coming in. And because most of the time, if you start talking about movement of people and removing the borders, you will see that that would be what is needed. But there is an inhibitor in the process. You allow for that movement, you have unwanted people, then you have some level of consequence in terms of your own economy being affected.
I think before we do that, we need to tighten the securities across our various borders so that Africans will move freely within the continent, because I've traveled 30 different African countries and I once got deported. Can you believe it? In Africa.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's come to Berlin. This is the Berlin Global Dialogue. And I mean, I'm seeing world leaders, business people, I mean, coming in here talking about how to, I mean, make the world a better place, right? I was expecting to see more African representation in here. Were you expecting the same thing?
I actually was initially, but when I saw the program, yeah, I saw that it's not many that were able to come through. I'm not so sure. I can't make a general statement. I've not asked the organizers, but I guess I'm happy to be here to represent. We always say in South Africa, where we find a platform, if we are alone, we would not speak for ourselves, but we'll speak for the continent as well. And that's what we've always done. You'd see that what we have done, even in BRICS, we've always advocated for African countries to be there. We're happy to see the admission of G20 admitting African Union. That's what we have been advocating for. So it's always, we utilize this platform to advocate for the continent. We advocate for what? Because our issues are similar. Whether you are in South Africa, whether you are in Nigeria, whether you are in Uganda, whether you are in Ghana, the same issues when we talk about just transition. That's why the conversation will be that, but we are not transitioning, we are in the dark. As a continent, a majority of our people have no access to energy, and therefore transitioning, where do we transition from to? It's such conversations, and you'd have seen even the president one time was speaking about how, global community, President Ramaphosa spoke about how global community, because he was driving the issue of COVID-19 vaccines for the continent. He was advocating for access for the continent, continental access to COVID-19 vaccine, and therefore he was able to articulate. I would like to see more African countries, more voices, not South Africa alone, on global platforms, because there is no way that the world can have conversations and leave Africa behind. We have people, in terms of people, we have the dividend. In terms of the global community, we have the majority of the minerals under our soil. We talk about minerals of the future. It is within the continent that you find those. So having conversation about the global economy without having the African continent's voice being represented and well represented, not skewedly one person or one country, even if it means regional bodies or the continental bodies being present to advocate for that work. And that's what we'd want to see going forward.
I think the world is talking about transitioning. Everyone is talking about it, renewable energy. But coming from Africa as a human settlement minister from South Africa, you can see that the transitioning will definitely be expensive for ordinary African. You don't think so?
There are two things about what I always raise on the issues around global climate change conversations and global warming. One is that when we have conversation even about financing, we talk financing about alternative energy, but we're not talking about financing for resettling people. Because remember, as a Minister of Human Settlements, I bear the brunt of climate change. When there are heavy disasters, when there are heavy storms, when there is nature taking course and displacing communities, we still have to place people. We still have to provide accommodation. There isn't funding that is cost, or within the conversation, funding that assists us as a continent, which we are not the people that caused this situation where we are. If you look at global emission, the continent emits very little because we've not been highly industrialized. And therefore, we get to bear the brunt, because you go and look at what happens in Mozambique. When the floods hit, communities get displaced. To rebuild, I had one city last year where we needed almost about 14 billion to be able to replace the people. And in the conversations globally, you don't find that conversation. You don't find the discussion around financing for resettling people who've been affected by the effects of climate change. That's the first thing. Second issue, it's the issue of conversation, that we're having conversations as leaders, we're having conversations as businesses and global community, but we leave in communities behind. And transitioning has to be in, that's why we talk about, as South Africa, we talk about just energy transition. So we're saying, don't forget the word just. It's very critical. So you're just not transitioning energy, but it has to be just. It has to be just to the people, to that country, and its economies. Because, for example, there are areas where, I make an example in South Africa. Yeah. If you look at where our coal mines are and our coal plants are in one province. That province, particularly when you look at its weather, it's a, how you call it, a humid type of environment. So it rains quite a lot. And then where you find the extreme sun, where we are able to build, where we are building renewable plants and everything, it's in another province. So you can't say to the community, for example, it's called Mpumalanga, you can't say to the community in Mpumalanga, you are going to transition to just energy, to renewables, and then you'll find jobs. It's not possible because there's no sun there. So we're building in another province. What is their conversation with those communities? What's going to happen to their lives? And I say this because you have got to look at the value chain as well. It's the coal mine, but you've got a small business person who provides services to this mine, either selling food, rental accommodation for the mine workers, whatever that they provide. Services, selling parts, those are drivers, contractors who have buses transporting. It's a whole value chain of an economic activity in a particular province. When you shut down those mines, when you shut down those power plants, there isn't anything left for them. So it's those conversations that we've got to have, and that's why we're talking about just what do you do? So the reskilling of those communities, repurposing and trying to get them into doing something else, it's another conversation. But we do acknowledge that we've got to, all of us, contribute to reduction of emissions in the global space. And that's why yesterday my conversation was that we always see this difficulty. For other countries, yes, where we are dark, we could immediately move into the issues and opportunity of the renewable, for example, solar plants and all those things can be a way that we originally just move people into those. But the technologies are not in the continent. So we become consumers of the technologies instead of producers of the technologies. And that's why it's going to be important for that we strengthen the manufacturing part of it. And that's part of the conversations we're having.
Honorable, before I let you go, I have one special request. I was in Durban some time ago during travel in Durban, and I saw the effect of climate change in Durban, where I saw so many families were displaced and some of them lost their homes and all of that. As a concerned citizen of Africa, I decided to just go and give them something. I donated something, but whilst we were donating, I found out that there's a family member, there's a man who lost the wife, lost the kids, and also at the same time, the whole house was washed away. So I decided to rebuild the house for him in Durban, South Africa. But I've raised the money to build the house, but I don't have a land to build on it. Okay. Honorable, in front of this camera, Durban, can you please find me a land that the money that I have, which today, if you give me the land, the house will be ready in a week? Where
in Durban? Julian.
I don't even know.
Okay, but somewhere we will be able to help you. We've purchased quite a number of land, as you know. That's the community I was talking about, that we needed to rebuild, literally, almost about 14 billion. We've had to buy pieces of land to be able to resettle the people, so we'll be able to get to that.
Thank you so much for talking to me, but how are you intending to bridge the gap of inequality in South Africa, between urban areas and then township in South Africa? This will be the last question, and we're done for the day.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a program in terms of human settlements, what we call social housing programs. We purchase land as government in urban cities. We're renovating buildings, old buildings that used to be offices, into apartments as part of closing the apartheid special landscape. So that is one of the things that we want to do as closing the inequality gap, where people are closer to where they work, they have economic opportunities, they've got social amenities closer to where they, and then they reduce the amount of money they spend on transport.
Honorable, it's really a pleasure speaking to you, and I hope to have more of this conversation back in South Africa. Thank you.
Definitely, we'll make time.
All right.